Sometimes, in the darkest corners of memory, pain refuses to die. Ethan Cole, a veteran haunted by shadows, wakes each night choking on nightmares he cannot remember, yet cannot escape. Beside him waits Shadow, a silent Malinois, eyes burning with secrets too heavy for words. And one night, Shadow leads Ethan to a forgotten corner. A rusted box, a blood-stained dog tag, Diego Martinez, his best friend, the one Ethan swore was dead. But inside the crumpled letter, the words shake the earth beneath him. Ethan, I'm still alive. Now nothing is certain. Were his memories stolen? Who wanted Diego erased? And can one dog guard the truth long enough for his master to face it? This is not just a story about war. This is a story of forgiveness, of lost brothers, and of a dog who refused to let hope die. 3 years have passed since Ethan Cole returned from Syria, but the war has never truly let him go. The small room he lives in feels frozen in time. Grey walls, dust-covered windows, sunlight quietly filtering through to illuminate the gaunt face of a man who's seen too much. Every morning, Ethan sits for hours by the window, staring out at the empty street. But his mind drifts far away, back to the desert, to the sound of gunfire and the haunting weight of memory. On the table, old newspapers, a cold cup of coffee, and a picture frame turned face down, a photograph Ethan can't bear to look at. At his feet, Shadow, the loyal Malinois, lies in silence, bright eyes tracking every movement of his master. Both carry wounds no one else can see, scars that never quite heal. Shadow is more than a dog. He's Ethan's only companion, a battle brother who stood by his side in the chaos of war. In Syria, Shadow saved Ethan's life more than once. Now, in this quiet room, he's the only soul keeping Ethan from slipping into the abyss of his own past. Night after night, the nightmares return. Ethan runs through ruined streets, gunfire echoing, screams slicing through dust and darkness. He sees Diego Martinez, his closest friend, still smiling, eyes shining with hope for tomorrow. Diego used to say, "When we get home, I'm opening a pizza shop. You'll be my first customer, Ethan." They dreamed of the future, of good things waiting for them after the war. But everything ended in an instant. A blinding explosion. Then darkness. Ethan remembers the helplessness as he screamed Diego's name, crawling through burning sand, praying his friend was still alive. But all he found was a blood-stained dog tag and a wound in his soul that would never heal. Ethan jolts awake in the middle of the night, sweat soaking his shirt, heart racing as if it might burst from his chest. In the darkness, Shadow sits close, quietly resting his head on Ethan's lap. Those deep, sad eyes seeming to understand everything. No words are spoken. Only Shadow's warmth keeps Ethan from drowning. Sometimes Ethan sits for hours, stroking Shadow's fur, whispering stories about Diego, about soccer games watched on a battered old laptop, hasty meals between bomb blasts, the jokes Diego invented to chase away fear. Shadow listens, sometimes tilting his head as if he truly understands. Maybe he does. Not with words, but with his heart. But tonight, the air is heavier. Shadow suddenly stands, ears alert, nose twitching. He moves toward the darkest corner of the room where the light doesn't reach, then looks back at Ethan with eyes full of urgency and mystery. Ethan hesitates. Shadow has never acted like this before. He stands, each step heavy on the cold wooden floor, and follows. Shadow stops in front of a small, dust-covered table, nose pointing beneath it, breath quickening. Ethan kneels, sweeps his hand through the dust, and finds something hard and cold. An old metal box, scratched and battered by time, but still locked tight. Had he ever seen it before? Or had he simply tried to forget? Ethan's hands tremble as he lifts the box. His heart thunders, sensing that something important is about to be revealed. He sits on the floor, Shadow beside him, eyes never leaving the box. Ethan fumbles with the lock. The click of metal echoes in the silent room. The lid opens, and inside, a blood-stained dog tag. Diego Martinez. The name catches the light. Ethan is stunned. Why is this dog tag here? He remembers leaving it on the battlefield with Diego. Beneath the dog tag lies a crumpled letter, paper yellowed with age. Diego's familiar handwriting. Ethan's fingers shake as he opens the letter. The words blur before his eyes, as if Diego's voice is reaching out from the past. Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't give it to you myself. I know you'll blame yourself for what happened in Syria, but you need to know the truth. I'm still alive. The words hit like thunder. Ethan sits frozen, the letter slipping from his hands. For years he's carried the guilt, believing he caused Diego's death. Now, everything is upside down. If Diego is alive, what really happened in Syria? Shadow moves closer, resting his head on Ethan's leg, eyes gentle and patient. In that moment, Ethan realizes he's not alone. Maybe only Shadow has the loyalty and patience to face the truth with him, no matter how painful it may be. Outside, the first light of dawn creeps through the window, illuminating two figures, a man and his dog, sitting together in the deep quiet. The box lies open between them, its contents promising answers to questions Ethan has been too afraid to ask. Shadow's warm breath on his hand reminds Ethan that some journeys can't be taken alone. Some truths require a faithful companion, one who will never lose hope, no matter how dark the path ahead. As the morning light grows stronger, Ethan knows this is only the beginning of a journey to uncover buried secrets, to find a friend he thought was lost forever, and to discover that sometimes the truest loyalty comes on four paws, with unwavering devotion. The dog tag glints in the new light, Diego's name a promise that some bonds can't be broken, not even by death, and Shadow, ever watchful, ever faithful, is ready to guide his master toward a truth that will change everything. The morning sun creeps across the battered floorboards, but Ethan barely notices. He sits motionless, Diego's letter trembling in his hands, Shadow's steady warmth pressed against his side. I'm still alive. The words echo again and again, until they're all that's left. For 3 years, Ethan has lived in the shadow of guilt, convinced that one terrible mistake cost his closest friend his life. Now, in the span of a page, everything has changed. He reads the letter over and over, searching for a crack, a sign it's some cruel trick. But the handwriting is Diego's. Those looping Ds, the way he always dotted his I's with a hard jab. If you're reading this, you found the box I left for you. I knew Shadow would lead you to it when the time was right. He always was smarter than both of us, wasn't he? Ethan's lips twitch. Even now, Diego's humour cuts through the fog. Shadow's ears flick at the sound of his name, and Ethan wonders, has his loyal companion known all along? Has Shadow been waiting, guarding this secret for the moment Ethan would be ready to face it? The letter grows darker, heavier with each line. I can't explain everything here. It's too dangerous. But you need to know. What happened that day wasn't your fault. None of it was. There are people who wanted me dead, Ethan. People with secrets worth killing for Ethan's heart pounds. He remembers Diego's tension, the late nights scribbling in a battered notebook, the way he'd started watching everyone, asking questions that seemed to lead nowhere. A memory surfaces. Diego hunched over his cot, writing by flashlight, his voice low. Just keeping track of things. Details matter out here. Ethan never asked what those details were. Now, he wishes he had. You were always the better soldier, Diego wrote. But I noticed things, patterns, money moving where it shouldn't, orders that didn't add up, equipment disappearing. I started keeping records. Someone found out Ethan's mind reels, all the odd missions, the sudden changes in orders, the way certain officers fell silent when Diego entered the room. It all starts to make a terrible kind of sense. Shadow whines, sensing Ethan's distress, and nudges his hand. Ethan strokes the dog's head, grounding himself in the present. Shadow is more than a pet. He's the last link to a world Ethan thought he'd lost forever. Diego's words continue. I had to disappear. It was the only way to stay alive and gather proof. They staged my death, made it look like friendly fire, and counted on your guilt to keep you quiet. But I've been out there, Ethan, watching, waiting, making sure you're safe, while I piece together the evidence we need to bring them down. Relief and fear battle in Ethan's chest. Diego is alive, but so are the people who tried to kill him. If they're watching Diego, are they watching Ethan too? The letter reveals more. I've spent 3 years building a case, following the money, tracing the lies. It goes deeper than we ever imagined. Guns, drugs, blood money. They'll kill anyone who gets too close. I need your help, Ethan. I can't do this alone. Ethan's footsteps echoed down the old wooden stairs, each creak louder in the suffocating silence. The air grew colder, thick with dust and the scent of mildew, memories buried in every shadow. Shadow moved ahead, his silhouette barely visible in the dim beam of Ethan's flashlight. The dog's movements were purposeful, almost urgent, as if he knew exactly where to go. Ethan's heart pounded. He could feel the weight of something monumental waiting for him below. They passed relics of another life, broken picture frames, boxes labelled in Ethan's own handwriting, a child's baseball glove. But Shadow ignored it all, nose to the ground, tail stiff with focus. He stopped at a battered metal cabinet in the corner, its surface coated in grime. Shadow looked up, eyes shining with a strange, knowing sadness. Ethan knelt and struggled with the rusted lock, hands trembling. The metallic click seemed to echo forever. Inside, stacks of faded folders, cassette tapes, a dusty tape recorder. Ethan's breath caught as he saw the label on the topmost tape. EC, post-incident interview, confidential. His name, his past. He wiped the tape clean, inserted it into the recorder, and pressed play. The machine whirred to life. Static. Then, a voice, cold, clinical, familiar. Subject EC shows severe PTSD after friendly fire incident. Memory suppression recommended. Ethan's pulse raced. Dr. Harrison, the psychiatrist who had treated him after Syria. The words were like ice in his veins. He rifled through the cabinet, finding a medical report. Recommend high-dose memory suppression. Objective. Erase recollection of actual events. Implant alternate memory regarding comrade's death. The tape continued. Now Ethan's own voice, young, desperate, trembling. I didn't shoot Diego. It was an order from above. Morrison gave the order. Diego was alive. He was crawling toward me. I couldn't. The sound of restraints tightening, a muffled sob, Ethan's voice breaking. No, don't make me forget. Diego's alive. Please don't do this. Dr. Harrison's voice colder than before. You will forget everything. Diego died from enemy fire, not because of you. You're a hero, Ethan. That will be your memory now. A hiss. The unmistakable sound of a syringe. Ethan's younger voice faded into silence. Ethan staggered back, bumping into the damp basement wall. His mind reeled as fragments of memory surged, the thunder of explosions, Diego's face twisted in pain, lips moving in a silent plea, the blinding light of a flare. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, trying to force the images away, but they only came faster, sharper. He gasped, clutching his head. They made me forget. They turned me into a weapon, then wiped it all away. For 3 years, I've blamed myself for Diego's death, when I should have been fighting for the truth. Shadow pressed closer, his fur warm against Ethan's hand. The dog's eyes were full of sorrow, but also strength, a silent promise that Ethan was not alone. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he dropped to his knees. He buried his face in Shadow's fur. The dog held him together. If it weren't for you, Shadow, I'd still be lost. You led me here. You've always known, haven't you? You saw what happened that night. You never forgot Shadow licked Ethan's hand, tail thumping softly, a gentle reminder of the bond they shared, of the loyalty that had never wavered. Ethan's sobs shook his body, but Shadow stayed pressed against him, silent and steadfast. The basement seemed to close in around them, filled with echoes of the past. Ethan let the memories wash over him. Diego's laughter in the barracks, the promise they'd made to look out for each other, the horror of that final night. I owe Diego the truth, Ethan whispered. He trusted me. He tried to warn me, and I let them erase it all. He looked at Shadow, voice raw. I owe you too. You never gave up on me. You brought me back when I was drowning in guilt. You're the only reason I'm still standing. Shadow nudged Ethan's chin, eyes bright with encouragement. Ethan wiped his tears, slowly rising to his feet. He gathered the tape, the files, clutching them to his chest. No more lies. No more running. I'm done being their puppet. I'm going to finish what Diego started. I'm going to remember everything, and I'm going to make them pay. He looked down at Shadow. Are you with me? Shadow barked softly, tail wagging, a vow of loyalty. A shaft of dawn light slips through a crack in the basement window, bathing them in gold. Ethan stands taller, resolve burning in his eyes. Shadow sits at his side, ready for whatever comes next. Together they step out of the shadows, into the light of a new chapter, the journey to reclaim lost memories, to seek justice, and to honour a bond that not even betrayal could break. Dawn filtered through the kitchen window, painting the cluttered table in pale gold. Ethan sat hunched over a pile of battered military files, his eyes hollow, hands trembling as he sifted through the evidence of a past he could no longer ignore. Shadow lay curled at his feet, ears perked, watching every movement with quiet intensity. The silence was thick, a pause before the storm. Ethan's fingers paused on a folder stamped with red ink, classified. Operation Sandstorm. His breath caught. He slid the file toward him, heart pounding. The cover was worn, edges frayed, as if it had been handled by many hands and then hidden away. Never meant to see the light of day. He opened it, and the truth he'd been running from stared back at him, cold, clinical, undeniable. He read aloud, voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid the words might shatter him. Sergeant Diego Martinez, Kaya, 0347 hours. Cause of death, single gunshot wound to the chest. Weapon, M24 sniper rifle. Operator, Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole. For a long moment, the world seemed to tilt. Ethan's mind reeled. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the words burned behind his eyelids. Shadow whimpered softly, pressing his head against Ethan's knee, a silent anchor to the present. A sudden wave of dizziness swept over Ethan, and the room seemed to dissolve. He was no longer in his kitchen, but back in the burning sands of Syria 3 years ago. Night pressed in on all sides, thick and suffocating. The only light came from the ghostly green glow of his night vision goggles. Ethan's breath fogged his mask as he crouched behind a crumbling wall, rifle trained on a distant figure moving through the ruins. His radio crackled in his ear. "Overwatch, this is command. Target approaching from the east. Take the shot." Ethan squinted through the scope. The figure was moving fast, hunched low, weaving between shadows. He whispered, "Target acquired." Finger tightened on the trigger, but suddenly, a voice, urgent, desperate, cut through the static. "Friendly, friendly. It's Martinez. Don't shoot." For a split second, everything slowed. Ethan's heart hammered. He recognized the gait, the way the man carried his weapon. Diego. But the shot had already left the barrel. A thunderclap in the silence. The figure crumpled, clutching his chest, eyes wide with shock and betrayal. Ethan's own voice, ragged and panicked, screamed into the radio. "Medic! MEDIC. I shot Diego. Oh God, I shot Diego." The memory shattered, and Ethan was yanked back to the present, gasping for air, sweat slick on his brow. He grabbed another file, a transcript from the investigation that followed. The words were as cold as the desert at night. Commander Morrison's voice, flat and unyielding. This was a tragic accident. Martinez was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Cole followed orders. This is war. Accidents happen. A younger officer's voice, shaking. "Sir, shouldn't we investigate?" There were conflicting reports. Morrison cut him off, voice sharp as a blade. "There will be no investigation. Martinez died from enemy fire. Cole's memory is unreliable. That's our story. Are we clear?" A chorus of reluctant assent. Ethan's fist slammed the table, rage and shame boiling inside him. He stared at the files, the official lies stacked like bricks in a wall he could never climb. Shadow stirred, nose twitching. He padded over to a dusty corner, nudging a crumpled envelope out from beneath a stack of boxes. Ethan frowned, picking it up. The handwriting was unmistakable. Diego's. His throat tightened as he unfolded the letter, addressed to Diego's wife Maria. He read, voice cracking with every word. "My dearest Maria, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. Whatever happened, it wasn't anyone's fault. War is chaos. Things go wrong. If it was Ethan, don't blame him. He's a good man. He saved me before. The guilt will destroy him if you let it. Tell him I forgive him. Tell him to live, for both of us. I love you always." Diego Ethan's tears fell, silent and heavy, each word both a balm and a blade. He pressed the letter to his chest, shoulders shaking. He sank into a chair, shadow pressing close, the dog's warmth grounding him as the storm raged inside. Ethan whispered, voice raw, "Diego forgave me." He knew the truth. And he forgave me. But I never forgave myself. I've carried this guilt for so long, it's become a part of me. He looked at Shadow, searching for answers in those deep, loyal eyes. How do I face his family, knowing what I did? How do I tell them the truth? Shadow pawed at the letter, drawing Ethan's gaze to the return address scribbled in the corner. Maria Martinez, 1247 Elm Street, Phoenix, Arizona. Shadow looked up, insistent, as if to say, "This is where you need to go." This is the next step. Ethan stared at the address, the weight of 3 years of guilt pressing down on him like a mountain. Yet beneath the pain, something else stirred, a flicker of resolve, faint but growing. "You're right, Shadow. I can't run from this anymore. Diego's family deserves the truth. They deserve to know he died a hero, not a mistake." He gathered the files, the letter, hands steadier now. Maria needs to hear this from me. She needs to know Diego's last thoughts were of love and forgiveness, not anger, not blame. Shadow's tail thumped, approval clear in his eyes. The morning sun crept higher, casting long shadows across the floor. Ethan stuffed the evidence into a battered duffel bag, his movements purposeful. Shadow waited by the door, alert and ready, as if sensing the gravity of what lay ahead. Ethan slung the bag over his shoulder, pausing to look down at his loyal companion. "Phoenix, Arizona," he said softly. "Are you ready for this, boy?" Shadow barked, a sound of courage and loyalty. Together, they stepped out the door, sunlight spilling over them, chasing away the darkness. The truth was finally coming to light, and Ethan was ready to face whatever awaited him, no matter the cost. The old pickup truck rolled slowly along the sunlit street leading to the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona. Ethan sat silently behind the wheel, his gaze distant, every breath heavy as if he carried the weight of his entire past. Shadow sat in the passenger seat, ears alert, eyes fixed on his partner, sensing the tension and fear growing inside Ethan. They stopped in front of a small yellow house, a white fence encircling a garden blooming with color. By the gate, a little sign read, "Martinez," shining in the early sunlight. Ethan stared at the house for a long moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He closed his eyes, drawing a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage he had left. "We can do this, right, Shadow?" Ethan whispered. Shadow gently placed a paw on Ethan's thigh, his gaze warm and reassuring. A silent encouragement. Ethan nodded, opening the door. Together, man and dog stepped out, each footstep on the brick path weighed down by years of memories. Ethan stood at the door, hand trembling as he knocked softly 3 times. After a moment, the door opened. Maria Martinez appeared, a young woman with long black hair, her face marked by sadness, her deep brown eyes full of worry. She froze when she saw Ethan, her lips quivering. "You're—" Maria stepped back, her voice choked. "You're the one who—" Ethan bowed his head, unable to meet her eyes. He spoke softly, his voice on the verge of breaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't remember anything. Not until recently. I came to tell you the truth and to apologize." The air grew thick with silence. Maria clutched the edge of the door, tears beginning to fall. Shadow moved forward, sitting between them, his gentle eyes trying to soothe the pain they both carried. After a long pause, Maria nodded and stepped aside. "Please come in," she whispered. The living room was warm and cozy, filled with photographs of Diego. Diego in uniform, Diego grinning with his wife, Diego with Shadow and friends. Ethan entered, feeling every pair of eyes in those pictures watching him, familiar yet so distant. Maria sat on the sofa, hugging a pillow tightly. Ethan sat across from her, Shadow lying quietly at their feet, watchful. "Diego spoke about you often," Maria said, tears still streaking her cheeks. "He said you were a good man. He told me if anything ever happened, not to blame yourself. He trusted you." Ethan clenched his hands together, his voice barely a whisper. "But you don't understand. I killed him. I shot Diego by mistake. I can never forgive myself." Maria broke down sobbing, but she shook her head, her eyes fierce with conviction. "Diego knew something like this could happen. He always said war is chaos, and sometimes good people face the worst. He never blamed you. In fact, he always trusted and was grateful for you." Suddenly, Shadow stood up and padded over to the corner of the room. With his sharp nose, he nudged open a low wooden drawer and looked back at Ethan and Maria as if to signal something. Maria stood, opened the drawer, and took out an old, faded photograph. She handed the photo to Ethan. In the picture, Diego and Ethan stood side by side in uniform, and between them was Shadow. those same loyal eyes, frozen in time between two young soldiers. The light in the photo captured a happiness long gone. Maria's voice trembled. Diego always kept this photo with him. He said, no matter what happened, this was his second family. Ethan held the photo, tears streaming down his face. He gently traced Diego's face, then looked at Shadow. Only memories remained now. Silently, Maria opened a small box and took out an old, worn leather journal. This is Diego's journal. He told me, if anything happened, I should give it to you. Ethan took the journal, hands shaking as he turned the pages. Diego's handwriting leapt off the paper, each word echoing with youth and hope. Ethan read aloud, his voice breaking. Ethan, if you're reading these lines, I probably didn't make it back with you. But never blame yourself. I don't blame you. I know if anyone could protect me, it would be you and Shadow. Remember the pizza shop we dreamed of, the laughter between battles. Hold on to that, not the guilt. I'm always grateful to have you in my life. Ethan clutched the journal to his chest, tears falling freely. Years of torment, nightmares, and guilt seemed to be washed away by friendship, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Maria stepped forward and gently embraced Ethan. Both wept, tears of pain, release, and a humanity that transcended war and loss. Shadow circled their feet, tail wagging, eyes shining with joy, seeing the two humans he loved finally finding peace. Outside, the sun had risen high, streaming through the window and bathing the room in golden light. The darkness of the past began to recede. In that moment, Ethan realized redemption was possible, not by erasing the past, but by facing it, accepting forgiveness, and allowing love to heal what war had broken. Shadow, the silent guardian, pressed close, anchoring them both to the present and the hope of a new beginning. The late afternoon sun faded over Phoenix, casting long shadows across the quiet avenue leading to the veterans' cemetery. Ethan and Shadow walked side by side beneath the canopy of trees, their footsteps echoing in the hush, a place where warriors rested and where the living still battled ghosts of the past. The air was heavy, charged with stories left unspoken, and only the soft wind and Shadow's steady steps kept Ethan grounded. They stopped before two graves, side by side, Samuel O'Connor and Louise Tran. Ethan bowed his head, resting a hand on the cold stone, grief and guilt weighing on his heart. Shadow sat close, eyes full of sorrow, sensing the pain that lingered here. Nearby, a small family stood by Samuel's grave, a middle-aged woman with red-rimmed eyes and a boy of about 10. Ethan approached quietly, voice gentle. "Excuse me, I'm Ethan Cole." I served, with Samuel. The woman looked startled, then nodded slowly. "You're the friend Sam used to talk about." He passed, and no one really understood why. It was like he'd forgotten everything before he died. The boy looked up, his eyes wide and honest. "Mister, my dad used to have nightmares. Once he said, 'Something's wrong. Someone took my memories.' But then he'd forget again." Ethan's heart clenched. He turned to Louise Tran's grave, where an elderly woman sat quietly, her trembling hands stroking an old photograph. Ethan knelt beside her, voice soft. "Are you Louise's mother?" She nodded, her faded eyes shining with grief that had no words. "Louise came back, but he wasn't my boy anymore. He forgot his friends, even what used to scare him. I thought it was just the war, but now I'm not sure." Ethan fell silent. The pieces were coming together. It wasn't just him. So many others had their memories stolen, their truths buried deep. Suddenly, Shadow sniffed the air and trotted toward a large tree. He pawed at the earth, digging up a small metal box. Ethan quickly opened it. Inside were old papers, medical records, scribbled notes, and a long list of names. Ethan scanned the list, his heart pounding. Samuel O'Connor, Louise Tran, Ethan Cole, and 44 more, 47 in all. Beside each name, memory erased regarding friendly fire incident. At the bottom, scrawled in shaky handwriting, conducted by Dr. Harrison, Phoenix Clinic, 72 Oakwood Street. Ethan's mind reeled. He flipped through the papers, medical files, incident reports, neurological test results. All bore Dr. Harrison's name, stamped with a red seal. Experiment approved. Ethan sat down hard, head spinning. He muttered, "Dr. Harrison, what did he do to us? How many of us lost our memories? How much truth has been buried?" Shadow pressed his head against Ethan's knee, a silent reminder that he wasn't alone. Ethan clutched the list, resolve burning in his chest. He stood and approached Samuel and Louise's families, showing them the list. It wasn't just Samuel or Louise. There are dozens of us. We're all victims. Our memories were stolen to hide something worse than war. Samuel's wife broke down in tears. So, Sam wasn't crazy or weak. He was a victim. Louise's mother gripped Ethan's hand, voice trembling. "Please, find the truth. Don't let our sons die for nothing." Ethan nodded, eyes wet. There was no turning back. The sky turned a fiery orange as dusk settled over the cemetery. Ethan and Shadow left, their hearts heavy but burning with new determination. Back at the truck, Ethan pulled out his phone, searching for the Phoenix Clinic address on Oakwood Street. A dated website loaded. Phoenix Psychological Clinic, Dr. Harrison, specializing in memory disorders for veterans. At the bottom, by appointment only, strict, confidentiality. Ethan looked at Shadow, his eyes steely. "We have to go there. Not just for us, but for everyone who's been hurt." Night fell. Ethan sat in the truck, poring over the files Shadow had found. One chilling pattern emerged. Some victims on the list were still alive, but many had vanished mysteriously after visiting Dr. Harrison's clinic. One report read, "Patient has no memory of the incident. Signs of psychological manipulation, even loss of behavioral control." Ethan closed his eyes, gripping the steering wheel. He whispered, "He's not just hiding the truth. He's still hurting people." Shadow whined softly, sharing his owner's unease. Ethan reached over, stroking Shadow's head, voice low. "You're the only one who can't have your memories erased." "You're the key," Shadow determination surged in Ethan. He copied the list of 47 names, highlighting those still alive. He searched for connections, patterns, anything that could help him expose Dr. Harrison's crimes. In the glow of the dashboard, Ethan dialed a number from one of the files. A weary voice answered. "Hello? This is Ethan Cole. I think you're on Dr. Harrison's list. Meet me tomorrow. We need to talk." A pause, then a shaky reply. I thought I was alone." "Where?" Ethan gave the location. As he hung up, he looked at Shadow, who stared back with unwavering loyalty. "We're not alone anymore," Ethan said, voice thick with emotion. "We'll bring this into the light." The next morning, Ethan met with 2 more survivors, each with the same story. Nightmares. They couldn't explain flashes of violence, then nothing. Visits to Dr. Harrison's clinic, after which their memories went dark. One survivor, a woman named Carla, showed Ethan a scar behind her ear. He said it was just a minor procedure. "After that, I lost months of my life." Ethan photographed the scar, adding it to his growing file. "He's still doing this," Ethan said. "He's still erasing memories." Still covering up friendly fire, Carla's voice shook. "Someone has to stop him. Ethan's resolve hardened. We will. Together, that night, Ethan and Shadow prepared to visit the clinic. Ethan loaded his bag with the evidence, the list, and Diego's journal. He knelt beside Shadow, looking into the dog's wise eyes. Whatever happens, we stick together. You're my memory, Shadow. You're my truth. Shadow nuzzled Ethan's hand, tail thumping softly. As they set out into the night, Ethan's mind raced with questions. But one thing was clear. Dr. Harrison was still out there, still preying on the broken, still erasing the memories of those who needed healing, not oblivion. The Phoenix Clinic loomed ahead in the darkness, a place where pain was buried, but never truly gone. Ethan gripped the wheel, determination hardening his features. Shadow sat alert at his side, ready for whatever waited on Oakwood Street. Together, they would face the man who had stolen their truth. Together, they would fight for the victims and for every veteran who deserved to remember, no matter how painful the truth. The real battle was just beginning. The city's pulse had slowed to a hush by midnight, Phoenix's restless heat finally giving way to a chill that seeped into Ethan's bones as he parked 2 blocks from the Phoenix Clinic. The neon sign flickered, half-lit, casting an eerie green glow over the cracked sidewalk, a beacon for the lost and the desperate. Ethan sat in the cab of his truck, hands gripping the wheel, Diego's journal and the list of 47 names burning a hole in his jacket pocket. Shadow pressed close, golden eyes fixed on his partner, sensing the gravity of what lay ahead. Ethan checked his phone one last time. No new messages, no calls for help. He was on his own, except for Shadow, who had never left his side. The city seemed suspended, as if holding its breath. He stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, and Shadow leapt lightly to the ground. They moved through the shadows, the distant hum of traffic fading as they approached the back alley. A chain-link fence, topped with barbed wire, ringed the rear of the clinic. Ethan found a gap near the dumpster, slipped through, and Shadow followed, belly low. The air was thick with the scent of garbage, bleach, and something metallic. Blood, or maybe just fear. A single security light glared above the back door. Ethan kept to the shadows, heart pounding. He pulled a set of lockpicks from his pocket. Old habits from a life where survival meant learning every trick. The lock clicked open with a soft snap, and he eased the door inward, pistol drawn, flashlight off. Inside, silence pressed in. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and old paper. The walls were lined with faded posters. Memory is healing. Trust the process. Ethan's beam swept over a glass case of military medals, tokens of trust, now trophies of betrayal. Shadow's hackles rose, nose twitching. He led Ethan down the corridor, past closed doors, each one a mystery. Somewhere, a clock ticked steadily, marking the seconds before everything changed. They reached the main office. Light spilled from beneath the door, and Ethan heard the scratch of a pen, the shuffle of papers. He signaled Shadow to stay low and pushed the door open. Dr. Harrison sat hunched at his desk, silver hair wild, spectacles perched on the end of his nose. The room was cluttered with files, vials, and a battered old tape recorder. He looked up, eyes sharp despite his age, and for a moment, time froze. "Mr. Cole," Harrison said, voice thin but steady. "I wondered when you'd come." Ethan stepped inside, Shadow at his heel, gaze unwavering. "You know why I'm here." Harrison regarded him, sadness flickering in his eyes. "You were always the stubborn one." "And your dog, Shadow, yes? Still, loyal." I see Ethan's jaw tightened. "You erased my memories. You stole my pain, my truth." Harrison's fingers drummed on the desk. I gave you what you wanted, what all of you wanted. Peace, freedom from nightmares. Ethan's voice trembled with fury. You took away our right to face what happened. You made us victims twice over. Harrison sighed, almost wistful. Pain destroys people, Ethan. You saw what it did to Sam, to Luis. I tried to spare you their fate. You never gave us a choice, Ethan shot back. You buried the truth. You buried us. Shadow let out a low growl, as if echoing Ethan's anger. The air was thick with accusation and regret. Suddenly, a muffled cry drifted from deeper in the clinic, a voice, desperate and weak. Ethan's attention snapped to the sound. He pushed past Harrison, who rose shakily to block his way. Don't go in there, the doctor pleaded. They're not ready. They need more time. Ethan ignored him, Shadow leading the charge. They moved down a narrow corridor, the floor scuffed by countless restless feet. The cries grew louder, joined by others, men and women, trapped in nightmares they could neither escape nor remember. Ethan forced open a heavy door. Inside, a row of beds lined the walls. Veterans, restrained, eyes glazed, murmured in confusion. Machines beeped and hissed, IV bags dripped clear liquid into their veins. A nurse, startled, tried to intervene, but Shadow bared his teeth, and she backed away, hands trembling. Ethan's heart twisted. These were the others, the names on his list. Some stared blankly at the ceiling. Others whimpered, caught between worlds. One man, face gaunt and haunted, whispered, "Please, make it stop." Ethan knelt beside him, voice gentle. "You're safe now. I'm here to help." He turned to find Harrison standing in the doorway, hands raised in surrender. "I'm helping them," the doctor insisted. "They come to me broken, begging to forget. I make that possible." "You're not a healer," Ethan said, voice raw. "You're a thief. You stole their lives." Harrison's face twisted in pain. "You don't understand. The things you saw, the things you did, they would have destroyed you. I saved you from yourselves." Ethan advanced, fists clenched. "You don't get to decide what we remember. You don't get to play God." Suddenly, Harrison lunged, a syringe flashing in his fist. He aimed for Ethan's neck, but Shadow sprang, teeth bared, slamming into Harrison's arm. The syringe clattered to the floor, its contents splattering across the linoleum. Ethan wrestled Harrison to the ground, adrenaline surging. "It's over," he spat, pinning the doctor's wrists. He grabbed the ring of keys from Harrison's belt and rushed to the beds, unlocking restraints, helping each patient sit up. Some wept. Others blinked in confusion as the fog began to lift. Shadow stood guard, hackles raised, never taking his eyes off Harrison. Ethan swept the room, gathering files, vials, and a battered hard drive. He stuffed everything into his backpack, evidence of years of abuse. From outside, sirens wailed. Someone had tripped the alarm. Red and blue lights danced through the windows. Shadow barked once, sharp and triumphant. Ethan dragged Harrison into the hall as police burst through the doors, guns drawn. "Hands up!" Ethan raised his hands, voice steady. "I have evidence." He's been experimenting on veterans. "The proof's in my bag." Officers cuffed Harrison, leading him away as he protested. "You don't understand." "I was saving them." The rescued patients were herded out, blinking in the harsh light, some clinging to Ethan, others reaching for Shadow. Ethan slumped against the wall, heart pounding like a war drum. Shadow pressed close, warm and solid against his side, his steady presence anchoring Ethan to the here and now. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the full, crushing weight of his memories, not the fragmented, anesthetized versions Dr. Harrison had left behind, but the raw, unfiltered truth with all its pain and clarity. It hurt, it burned, but it was real, and it was his. He let his head fall back, eyes stinging with tears he refused to hide. Around them, the chaos of rescue swirled, paramedics tending to dazed veterans, officers hauling boxes of evidence, detectives barking into radios. Somewhere in the background, a news van's headlights cut through the night, reporters already circling. But for Ethan, the world narrowed to the gentle pressure of Shadow's fur and the steady rhythm of his dog's breath. Shadow looked up at him, golden eyes full of understanding and quiet pride. Ethan managed a shaky smile, reaching down to ruffle the dog's ears. "We did it, buddy," he whispered, voice thick. "We brought them home." Shadow licked his hand, tail thumping softly against the linoleum. The spell was broken. The truth, at last, was free. One by one, the rescued veterans shuffled past, some clinging to Ethan's arm, others reaching out to touch Shadow as if he were a talisman. Ethan met their eyes, haunted, grateful, alive. He knew the road ahead would be hard. Healing was not a straight line, and the scars they bore would never fully fade. But at least now, they could begin. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the exhaustion and relief wash over him. The ghosts of the past, Diego, Sam, Luis, the 47 names, felt closer now, not as burdens, but as witnesses. Their stories would be told. Their memories would be honored. Somewhere outside, Dr. Harrison's voice rose in protest as he was led away in handcuffs, insisting he'd only ever wanted to help. Ethan didn't look back. Justice had come, and with it, a measure of peace. Shadow nuzzled closer, and Ethan wrapped an arm around his faithful companion. In the darkness of the empty clinic, they sat, together, two survivors, two fighters, two souls finally facing the truth. The pain would never vanish, but now it had meaning. Now, at last, the real healing could begin. The night air outside the Phoenix Clinic was thick with sirens and the buzz of urgent voices. Ethan stepped out beneath the harsh floodlights, Shadow at his side, both blinking as if emerging from a long, dark tunnel. The rescued veterans clustered together, some weeping openly, others silent and stunned. Ambulances lined the curb, their doors yawning open like mouths waiting to swallow pain. Ethan paused at the threshold, the battered hard drive heavy in his pocket, the list of names clutched in his hand. He looked up at the sky, no stars, just the orange haze of city light. For years, he'd run from the truth. Tonight, he'd dragged it out into the open, raw and screaming. A paramedic approached, offering Ethan a blanket. He shook his head, but Shadow accepted a gentle pat and a bowl of water. Reporters pressed forward, cameras flashing, microphones thrust out, voices clamoring for a statement. Ethan ignored them, focusing instead on the faces around him, the men and women who had been lost, now blinking in the glare of freedom. Detective Alvarez, the lead investigator, strode over, her expression a mix of disbelief and admiration. "You did good, Cole. We'll need your statement." And whatever's on that drive, Ethan nodded, handing over the evidence. "It's all there. Records, drugs, everything Harrison did. The list of names. Maybe more." Alvarez's jaw tightened. "We'll get them justice." As officers led Harrison past, the doctor's eyes met Ethan's. For a moment, the old man looked small, broken by the weight of his own choices. He opened his mouth, as if to explain, but Ethan turned away. Some truths didn't need to be heard again. Shadow pressed close, sensing the storm of emotions swirling inside Ethan. The Malinois' presence was a lifeline, a reminder that loyalty, unlike memory, could not be erased. By first light, the sky was pale as dawn broke. Ethan finally sat on the curb, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. Shadow leaned against him, head in his lap. The world was strangely quiet now, the chaos receding, leaving only the soft murmurs of the rescued veterans and the distant hum of city life resuming. Maria arrived, her car screeching to a halt. She rushed to Ethan, tears streaming down her face. Without a word, she threw her arms around him, and he let himself be held, the dam inside finally breaking. Shadow nuzzled Maria's hand, tail thumping softly. "They're safe," Ethan managed, voice hoarse. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Maria nodded, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "You did what no one else could. You brought them home." For a long moment, they sat together, shadow pressed between them, the three of them bound by grief and hope, and the knowledge that love, however battered, had survived. In the days that followed, the story exploded across the news. "Phoenix Clinic scandal," the headlines screamed. "Veterans freed from memory experiments." Ethan's face appeared on screens, always with Shadow at his side. Reporters called him a hero. Ethan felt anything but. He visited the hospital every day, checking on the rescued veterans. Some were lucid, memories flooding back in painful waves. Others struggled to piece together who they were, what had happened. Ethan listened to their stories, held their hands, promised them they weren't alone. Shadow became a fixture in the ward, moving from bed to bed, offering comfort in ways words never could. One veteran, a young woman with haunted eyes, wept into Shadow's fur for hours. Another, a grizzled sergeant, managed a shaky salute. "Good dog," he whispered, voice breaking. Ethan met with Detective Alvarez, providing every detail he could remember. The investigation widened. Other clinics, other doctors, more names. The truth, once buried, was spreading like wildfire. One evening, Ethan stood at Diego's grave, the journal clutched in his hands. Maria stood beside him, a bouquet of wildflowers trembling in her grasp. The cemetery was quiet, the sun setting in streaks of gold and crimson. Ethan knelt, placing the journal on the stone. "You saved me, Diego. Even when you were gone, you saved me. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember." Maria squeezed his shoulder. "He forgave you. He loved you, and he'd be proud of what you did." Shadow sat beside them, head bowed, as if honoring the fallen. Ethan closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of earth and grass, letting the memories come. The laughter of his friends, the terror of battle, the long lonely nights. He let them all in, every scar, every lesson. He was done running. Weeks passed. The clinic was shuttered, its windows boarded, the sign torn down. Harrison awaited trial, his name now synonymous with betrayal. The rescued veterans began the slow, painful work of healing. Some found their families again, others built new ones, bound by shared pain and survival. Ethan and Maria started a support group in Phoenix, the Memory Keepers. Veterans gathered in a church basement, sharing stories, supporting each other. Shadow was always there, the unofficial mascot, his gentle presence a balm for wounded souls. One night, a new face appeared. A young man, barely out of his teens, eyes darting with fear. He hesitated at the door until Shadow trotted over, tail wagging. The boy knelt, burying his face in the dog's fur, and for the first time smiled. Ethan watched, heart swelling with hope. "You're safe here. Start where it hurts. We'll face it together." In time, Ethan's nightmares didn't vanish, but they changed. Now, when the darkness closed in, Shadow was there, guiding him back to the light. He dreamed of Diego, of Sam and Luis, not as ghosts, but as companions on the road to redemption. He learned to forgive himself, Not because the past was erased, but because it was finally understood. The pain was real, but so was the love. One morning, Ethan woke to find Shadow watching the sunrise, ears perked, eyes bright. Ethan joined him on the porch, coffee in hand, letting the warmth seep into his bones. "We did good, didn't we?" he murmured. Shadow thumped his tail, leaning into Ethan's side. They sat together, man and dog, survivors both. The world was still broken, still full of shadows, but for the first time, Ethan believed in the possibility of healing. The story of the Phoenix Clinic became a rallying cry for reform, new laws, new oversight, new hope for those who had suffered in silence. Ethan spoke at hearings, his voice steady, his message clear. We owe our veterans the truth, no matter how painful. Healing begins with honesty. We cannot erase the past, but we can honor it, and each other, by facing it together. His words echoed through the chamber, picked up by news stations and advocacy groups. Survivors from across the country wrote letters, some angry, some grateful, all demanding change. The list of names Ethan carried became a symbol. 47 stories that would never be forgotten. In the months that followed, new safeguards were put in place. Clinics were required to have independent oversight. Veterans were given access to all their records. Ethan worked with Maria and other survivors to create a national registry so no one could be lost or silenced again. Shadow's photo, standing beside Ethan at a podium, became an emblem for the movement. Steadfast, loyal, unbreakable. But it was never just about policy. For Ethan, the true victory was quieter. It was the laughter in the support group, the letters from families reunited, the way Shadow curled up beside a trembling veteran and, with a single nudge, made the world feel safe again. On the 1-year anniversary of the rescue, the memory keepers gathered at the cemetery. Maria led the way, placing flowers at Diego's grave. Ethan read aloud from Diego's journal, his voice strong, unashamed of the tears that fell. Shadow lay at his feet, eyes closed, as if listening to every word. "We remember," Ethan finished, looking around at the faces, old, young, scarred and healing. "And we keep going, for ourselves, for each other." The sun broke through the clouds, painting the headstones in gold. For a moment, the pain of the past and the hope of the future existed side by side, woven together by memory and love. Ethan knelt, pressing his hand to the earth. Shadow leaned in, and together, man and dog, they faced the dawn. Not as victims, but as keepers of the truth, guardians of those who could not speak. And as the wind stirred the grass, carrying the promise of a new day, Ethan knew redemption was not forgetting, but remembering and choosing to move forward, together. The year turned, and with it, the world seemed to breathe a little easier. Yet for Ethan, the journey was far from over. The headlines faded, the hearings ended, but the ache of memory remained, a steady drumbeat in his chest, both wound and anchor. On a quiet Sunday morning, the support group gathered in the old church basement. Sunlight spilled through stained glass, painting the floor in fractured reds and blues. The circle was larger now, new faces, new stories, each person clutching their own fragments of the past. Shadow trotted from lap to lap, his presence a wordless comfort. Ethan listened as a young woman, Carla, spoke for the first time. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were fierce. "I thought I was alone," she admitted. "But I see now, none of us are. We're all trying to remember who we were and who we want to become." Applause rippled through the group. Ethan caught Maria's eye, her nod full of pride and gratitude. The room felt lighter, the burden of silence broken. After the meeting, Ethan lingered, sorting through a stack of mail. One envelope, battered and yellowed, caught his attention. The return address was unfamiliar. Inside was a letter, written in a shaky hand. Dear Ethan, I was at the Phoenix Clinic too. I remember your dog, how he sat beside my bed, how he looked at me like I mattered. I didn't have the strength to speak then, but I do now. Thank you for fighting for us, for not letting us disappear. I'm learning to live again. I got a job at a bookstore. Some days are hard, but I have hope. Give Shadow a treat for me. Michael. Ethan's throat tightened. He knelt, offering Shadow a biscuit. From Michael, he whispered. Shadow wagged his tail as if he understood the weight of gratitude carried across miles and months. Meanwhile, Maria spent her days volunteering at the clinic, now transformed into a rehabilitation centre. She led art classes, helping veterans express what words could not. One afternoon, Ethan visited, watching as Maria guided trembling hands across canvas. The paintings were chaotic, raw, swirls of colour and memory. Art is a way out, Maria explained, a way to make sense of the mess inside. Ethan nodded, understanding. He watched as Shadow curled up beneath a table, veterans reaching down to stroke his fur. Even without speech, Shadow was a healer. The day of Dr. Harrison's sentencing arrived. The courtroom was packed. Survivors, families, advocates, reporters. Ethan sat in the front row, Maria beside him, Shadow at his feet. Harrison looked older, diminished. When given the chance to speak, he stared at his hands. I thought I was helping, he muttered. I wanted to end their pain. Ethan's jaw tightened. When his turn came, he stood, voice steady. Pain is not something to be erased, he said. It's something to be understood. You took our memories, but you didn't take our will to fight. We are more than what you tried to make us forget. The May judge's gavel fell. Harrison was led away, his legacy forever tarnished. But for Ethan, the true victory was in the faces around him, the survivors who had reclaimed their stories. That evening, the support group gathered at the park. Lanterns floated on the pond, flickering points of light against the darkness. Each lantern bore a name, a friend lost, a memory reclaimed. Ethan stood with Maria and Shadow, watching as the lanterns drifted. He remembered Diego's laughter, Sam's stubbornness, Luis's quiet courage. He remembered the terror and the hope, the pain and the love. Maria slipped her hand into his. We carry them with us, she whispered. Shadow pressed against Ethan's leg, warm and steady. Together, they watched the lanterns until the last light faded. Weeks passed. The memory keepers grew, chapters forming in other cities. Ethan travelled, speaking at schools, clinics, and community centres. He told the story, not just of the Phoenix Clinic, but of resilience, of how pain, when shared, could become strength. Shadow was always by his side. Children flocked to him. Veterans knelt to scratch his ears. He became a symbol, his photo on posters and websites. Shadow, guardian of memory. One afternoon, after a talk at a local college, a student approached Ethan. My dad served in Iraq, she said, voice trembling. He never talks about it. But I think he'd like to meet you. And Shadow Ethan smiled. We'd be honored. Back in Phoenix, Ethan and Maria found moments of peace. They hiked desert trails at sunrise, Shadow bounding ahead, nose to the wind. They cooked together, laughed at burnt toast and spilled coffee. At night, Ethan read Diego's journal, finding comfort in old words. The nightmares still came, but less often. When they did, Shadow was there, grounding him. Maria would hold his hand until the fear faded. One morning, Ethan woke to find Shadow sitting at the window, watching the dawn. He joined him, sipping coffee as the sky turned gold. We're still here. Ethan said softly. Shadow nudged his knee, tail sweeping the floor. On the anniversary of the rescue, the memory keepers returned to the cemetery. This time the gathering was larger. Families, friends, strangers drawn by the story of courage and hope. Ethan spoke, voice ringing clear. We gather not to mourn, but to remember, to honor those we lost, and to celebrate those who found their way home. Our scars tell our story. Our memories are our strength. We are the keepers of each other's truth. Maria read a poem she'd written. Shadow lay at her feet, eyes closed, as if listening to every word. The group released doves, white wings flashing against the sky. Laughter mingled with tears, a tapestry of healing. The Phoenix Clinic building was repurposed again, this time as a community center for veterans and their families. The lobby bore a mural, a soldier and his dog, standing together beneath a rising sun. The inscription read, "Memory is not a burden, but a bridge." Ethan volunteered there, leading workshops, organizing events. Shadow greeted everyone at the door, tail wagging, eyes bright. Children drew pictures of him, veterans told stories, families found hope. One evening, as the sun set, Ethan stood before the mural, Shadow at his side. Maria joined them, slipping her arm around his waist. "We did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief and pride. Ethan nodded, his eyes glistening in the fading light. "Diego would be proud," he said softly. They stood together, taking in the mural, soldier and dog, bathed in a sunrise of painted golds and oranges. Shadow pressed close to Ethan's leg, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. For a long while, they said nothing, letting the silence speak for all the pain, love, and redemption that had brought them here. The community center buzzed behind them with laughter and conversation, veterans and families, children chasing each other, the air alive with the sound of hope. Maria squeezed Ethan's hand. All of this. It started because you refused to forget, because Shadow refused to give up. Ethan looked down at his loyal companion. Shadow gazed back, ears perked, eyes bright, tail sweeping the floor in slow, contented arcs. "He saved me," Ethan murmured. "He saved all of us." Maria leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "You both did." As the last rays of sun slipped below the horizon, the three of them stood as living proof that scars could heal, that memory could be reclaimed, and that even the deepest wounds could become bridges, connecting past to present, pain to hope, loss to love. Months later, a letter arrived at the center. It was from a young veteran named Marcus, recently discharged and struggling with nightmares and confusion. He'd heard about the memory keepers, about Ethan and Shadow, and asked for help. Without hesitation, Ethan and Shadow set out, this time Maria joining them. Their journey took them to a small town in Colorado, where Marcus waited, haunted and alone. Shadow approached him first, gentle and patient. Marcus knelt, burying his face in the dog's fur, and for the first time in months, he wept. Ethan sat beside him, offering not answers, but understanding. "You're not alone," he promised. "We remember. We heal." Together, the memory keepers grew, chapters spreading to new cities, new hands taking up the torch. Shadow became a legend, his story inspiring therapy dog programs across the country. Maria's art classes flourished, her murals brightening clinics and community centers from coast to coast. Ethan and Maria, side by side, trained new volunteers. They taught that healing was a journey, not a destination, that every memory, no matter how painful, was a thread in the tapestry of who they were. At every gathering, Ethan would read the last lines from Diego's journal. "Love is the only memory that matters. Everything else is just details." Years passed. Ethan's hair silvered. Shadow moved a little slower, but their bond never wavered. On quiet evenings, they sat on the porch, watching the sky fade from gold to indigo. Sometimes, Maria would join them, her laughter a spark in the twilight. The world was still imperfect, full of shadows and scars. But Ethan knew now, redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but honoring it. It was about showing up, day after day, for those who needed it most. And as the stars emerged, Ethan would rest his hand on Shadow's head, feeling the steady heartbeat of hope. "We did it," he'd whisper again, and Shadow's tail would thump in agreement. Together, they watched the darkness, unafraid, guardians of memory, keepers of the light. If memories are weighing you down, remember, you are not alone. Reach out. There are hands ready to listen, to share, and to walk beside you on the road to healing.